Namaste. If you were able to join a little earlier, listening to the Mother's music, which Deborah Booth provided to us, as always she does, you saw a scene. Flowers on the roof of a building in Pondicherry, India. The flowers Mother called transformation. The rooms that you saw across the street were those windows through which Sri Aurobindo viewed the world. Those are his rooms. So you're looking at history and drinking in the significance which is possible to us if we regard nature from an inner aspect and not simply as a material expression. There is power in everything, conscious power. And that's sort of what we're talking about tonight. So thank you, Deborah. The Life Divine is a record of profound insight that Sri Aurobindo recorded in philosophic terms based on his own encompassing spiritual experience. It is a penetrating and encompassing vision. Even when he rises into what we could call, figuratively, the transcendent terrain, that he knew deeply, that he could seize all this at once, understand the comprehensiveness based on his experience, and then rationally explain in beautiful, mellifluous English is simply unexampled. So it's always a joy to be able to come together, isn't it? And think about, talk about, gather around the Life Divine. So he begins first, or perhaps beyond the first, by positing a pure, transcendent existence. What we mean by that is that this is without border, without distinction, without figuration, something that exceeds our mental capacity even to approach it. The Upanishad says one falls back from that in the mind, unattaining. You can't grasp that. You can become that. You can absorb yourself into it. For Sri Aurobindo, the question was not simply experiencing transcendent being, but becoming conscious in it by staying in it, not simply experiencing it like a ballistic missile that goes into the atmosphere and then falls back to Earth, but to become a denizen of the transcendence, of those higher spiritual planes of awareness above the lid of the ratiocinative human mind. This is what he did on a daily basis. He stayed there. He achieved that and then climbed higher and higher. So he's speaking from experience when he says, first, there is this transcendence. It is able, or it wills itself to be. It is swayambhu. It is self-caused. self-defined. And as pure being, it is an essence, but not merely an essence. It has the capacity to manifest, because its nature is not simply to be aware of itself or to be delighted with itself, but also to be dynamic. So this huge reality, this which is incommensurate with anything we know about cosmic expanse, is always held within itself, this being, but also majestic in manifestation. When it creates the world from its innate power, it is called Hiranyagarbha, which confers to us the idea that this is a golden power of awareness, something that is true. If it's gold, it's true. And this supreme golden awareness is essential, true, and inviolate. Its transcendent station is not its only poise. It is also cosmic. It is also personal. And it is so because in its own nature, this being is conscious force. It is Chit Shakti. This is not something that is stated in the ordinary tables of Vedantic literature, but it is known to a number of Vedantic seers, experiencers. We come to Vedanta because it is the closest approximation in Indian philosophy to what Sri Aurobindo sees as the nature of the world and our place in it. So we often refer to Vedanta not to limit ourselves, but just to find something that when we look at it, we recognize it. These are the same truths. So if this moving, dynamic expression of true being with innate force behind it moves out, its nature of consciousness is by definition a consciousness of knowledge. It is knowledge in its pure state. It is in that realm, that supernal realm, a timeless flow of being. It's the one aware being which is substantiated by its identity with reality. Because it is an aspect of reality, it is wholly true in and of itself. Its ideas are true, they're self-established, and when we think of them as having innate power, they are self-realizing. Knowledge is an aspect or an attribute of consciousness force, Chit Shakti. And it doesn't just exist above. It is in all things. It inheres in all things. It is a universal truth. So knowledge is present, even if there seems to be darkness. As we have said before, there may be darkness, but light is at the base of darkness. Light cannot be extinguished by darkness. This darkness can only be a discontinuance, a momentary lapse, a significant disguise which light puts upon itself. Knowledge may disguise itself as ignorance, may compress itself, but never disappears. Ignorance, like knowledge, both are an action of consciousness force. But in knowledge, it is limitless, self-known, free, luminous. In darkness of ignorance, knowledge has to act in a way that is truncated. Its being is not entire. It has accepted that disguise as a role it will adopt in this play of the universe. It's not its only nature. It's not its original nature. It's not its final nature. Ignorance has no right to persist through all of time. If that which seems to be ignorant wishes from within to wake up and rediscover its native power, its glory, its joy, it can. But it has to pass through many portals to get there. Having come into this game, it has to play by the rules of the game until it becomes so much the master that it can change the rules of the game. So this knowledge that we seek, that we feel we don't have with a capital K, is part of an omnipresence, a reality, a divine reality which is everywhere. It must be present here. It must be eminent here, that is to say, spread through all things, even if it is concealed. So that makes us ask some questions about the nature of consciousness force. How can an infinite consciousness that has no restrictions manifest a world which has limitations? And the answer to that is analogous to our own self-experience. The divine consciousness force, Chit Shakti, is capable of self-restriction. Like when we sit in meditation and practice dharana, great concentration, and we exclude everything that seems to be out there. We are focused on something essential. There is an image for some. There is a verse for others. For some, there is nothing except simply focusing on the being. But wherever you put your consciousness, that focus is so entire that everything else is forgotten. Now, the divine consciousness can do this too. But in so doing, in its supernal state, that self-restriction is not self-abnegation. It is not self-denial. It retains its complete knowledge, its complete status in all of its aspects of being, as a transcendent, as a cosmos, as an individual. And it's only at the levels of the cosmic and in the individual, pardon me, that this restriction of consciousness can result in what we would call an ignorance, or we ignore our larger self. It's always wise to come back to the root of a word, to rediscover what it really signifies. Ignorance is not an absence of information. Ignorance is a self-forgetfulness, but a deep self-forgetfulness. Something that operates in the cosmic person just as it operates and exists in the individual person. So we have to recognize this power of exclusive concentration, which is natural to Chit Shakti. So ignorance is fundamentally a limitation of knowledge, purposely wrought. And it exists within the complete consciousness of the divine, not outside of it. But as we know ignorance, To our experience, as Sri Aurobindo describes, it has several, in fact, seven folds or folders in which it exists. So there's the original ignorance, the cosmic ignorance, egoistic ignorance, temporal, psychological, constitutional, and practical ignorance. We've been through this before when we did a brief survey of this great book a few months ago. But if we operate in the constricted field which we deem to be ignorance, the supernal reality, the real idea above, that is, where knowledge is self-empowered and any idea that it has is self-effectuated because it's pure and true and contexted in the supreme reality, that is only confirmable to us in inner experience. We have not found the solution to manifest that here in the flesh of our lives. To do that, we have, in a sense, to complete the reacquisition of that knowledge by scaling the heights of existence, climbing the stairway all the way to the top, beyond the mind into the ranges of higher consciousness. And then we can win permission to express the entirety of what a truth idea is, a real idea is here. So that suggests to us a long process of development. Without that process, we can't succeed in that. But look at where we are. We have already climbed out of material ignorance. We are struggling through vital and mental ignorance and questing upwards as a race, and certainly as individuals, not accepting any pause as a final destination, but regarding every stage as intermediary. We continue to advance. We continue to advance. So, ignorance has a retreating border to us. We feel that we gain a power, but then we find that it was illusory, that we did not really have that power. We have an experience, we think it reshapes our lives, but we find that it's not the final experience that's transformative. And we have to continue to grow out of ignorance and towards knowledge. And as we grow, we leave behind the phenomenal, that is to say, getting stuck in the phenomena of the physical world, but why not also the vital and the mental world? The phantasmal, that is to say, our ideas where we sort of self-promote and think we've already achieved, declare victory a little early and find, whoops, the whole castle is gone in a swoop. And we were not on solid ground. And we begin again. So the outer eye has to yield to the inner eye. That demands difficult psychological growth. But we are encouraged because there is a will in the conscious force that's inside all existence, a hidden knowledge in every form of what we deem to be ignorant that pushes us. And the thing that we have to remember is that the finite expression, whether it's a thing or a feeling or an idea, a relationship, is an expression of an infinite indeterminable. This reality is so vast. Everything in it is identical. Everything in it is the same thing. But by focusing on the finite, we lose the infinite. Instead, we should use the form of the finite as a way, as a gate, as a window through which we travel or peer into the beyond. into what it really is, to see it as a symbol, as a secret, and our soul is the key to turn the lock, not our mind which wants to riddle it out, or our vital which wants to defeat it with a violent conquest, or the material, does it want to move after all? Left to itself, it might be inert. We need vitality to keep us growing. We need mentality to keep us seeking, but we need also our soul to reach our real destination. So, in the original status of knowledge, that aspect within Chit Shakti, consciousness force, that we would call, that Sri Aurobindo would call the supermind, knowledge is identical with self-being, with Swayambhu, making yourself. The infinite makes itself. We, as aspects of the infinite, made ourselves with the infinite's blessing, you might say, or with its starting the race with and for us. Off we go as agents identical in essence to that. However different the form may be, the expanse doesn't matter. In essence, we are that. So, the greatest knowledge, then, is that which takes us back to this self-identity. Knowledge by identity is the supreme knowledge to Sri Aurobindo. And that means a knowledge of oneness. The greatest knowledge is oneness. And you might also say that the greatest love is oneness. And also that the most perfect action is in oneness with the integral divine will. Oneness always is what we strive to achieve. Ignorance is division. Ignorance seemingly divides everything in a fractured, shattered universe. Humpty Dumpty fell down and can't be put back together because all of this is scattered everywhere. The universe is no longer one. But that's only to the mental view. To the soul view, this can be reunited. The soul is the glue. But the agent for reforming the lost unity is a higher consciousness that works in, through, and with the soul. And that is what Sri Aurobindo calls the supramental, an agency and power of consciousness beyond the farthest stretch of the mind. Even the cosmic mind cannot achieve this. Something more can come if we invite it by the nature of our forceful ascent above. So we mentioned knowledge by identity, but you'll remember in that great chapter, Knowledge by Identity and Separative Knowledge, that there are four. The second kind of knowledge is knowledge by direct contact. But a third is a knowledge by separation from the object observed, sort of indirect. And the fourth, where we are completely separated, seemingly, and reliant on the machinery of indirect contact in the most external sense. So these are steps back towards the unitive knowledge by identity, but they suggest that they were deposited as involutionary possibilities that we could rediscover potentially as we grew in the universe. This does presuppose, of course, that it's not simply the cosmos advancing, but since the individual is real too, there's a divine person, and all of us are small versions, you might say, individuations of that divine person, that we too have that power, that capacity to reascend. we exceed, we grow through the struggle of the evolution to achieve this. Evolution and self-change are demanded to complete that mission, to reach that destination, which always opens, of course, to other destinations. But this is a principal one. This is something that's meaningful to the entire cosmos. And so, in a way, the universe has wagered on us to fulfill this. It's a big task, isn't it? So we have to gain freedom from ignorance. And that's true of us wherever we are in our personal development. There's more to do, because even if we have achieved moksha, freedom from inside, that doesn't mean that we've achieved freedom all the way down to the body. So always there's something to work on, something to win and then use as a transformative power or force to affix it in the earth stuff. Because if we don't make it material, well, the victory may be evanescent. So wherever we are, we start. And the first thing Sri Aurobindo suggests is self-study. When we study ourselves, and remember, this is one of the important elements of yoga. Some of the first edicts ever spoken about yoga in the Mahabharata or the Shvetashvatara Upanishad are about what these are. Later, of course, they appear in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras 1,000 years later or whatever. But one has to observe oneself, make oneself a scene of study. We are the literature we need to read. We are the idol that we must investigate. Every feature, every nook, every cranny of our being. Because as we discover it, we find that, this also is true of the universe. What is true in the microcosm is true in the macrocosm. And as we discover that, another onion skin, another skin is pulled back from ignorance, and there is knowledge where there was ignorance before. So this is also how Sri Aurobindo proceeded. This was his own route out of the morass of human ignorance and the indeterminism, you might say, of the philosophic mind, whether it's Eastern or Western. If you look at his chapter on the boundaries of the ignorance, you get a sense of what he's saying, that we only know a small portion of ourselves. We're only directly aware of a limited span of our consciousness, which ranges high, ranges low, and then also proceeds behind. We don't know. We don't even remember much of what we experience. It falls out of our hands as we passage along. We go into the next destination. We drop what we had. We don't remember it anymore. But it isn't really lost. There is something deeper in us, a soul power that's gathering the sap of the experiences. So don't worry about your memory. Your memory is not important so much as the soul's power to absorb and to stay interested and to find in its body, life, and mind enough juice and enough power that it can continue to move forward. That's important, to escape the enclosing ignorance. That's what we're here to do, is to defeat ignorance in ourselves and reunify ourselves with higher nature and being. So whatever we meet usefully in our life helps inform us, helps shape us, and helps nature too. There is a deposit in nature's bank when we learn something and grow, especially if we come bright and luminous enough to share it with another. If you can become yourself a beacon of light, you're illuminating darkness and making darkness retreat. And where there was ignorance, knowledge comes out in one form or the other and aspires back to the truth. So every experience, all groping knowledge, even if we're just trying but failing, it has a utility. And Sri Aurobindo, in that same chapter, empowers us to recognize that we are all of us more than we think. Our estimation of what we are doesn't capture the enormity of what we have been in the past and where we're going in the future. We look at a tiny slice of ourselves and often condemn what we see to be our littleness. We're more than that. We're unaware until we come into the soul's consciousness of the deeper direction and purpose that we have. Because that has been soul chosen and divinely directed. That is what has led us here into this dark world. But it will become brighter with every disclosure along the way. So, that self-study has to go deep within. It can't simply be, what are the contents of my thoughts? Let me do a quick capture of an inventory process of what emotions I have. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that would go beyond whatever you would obtain in ordinary psychological investigation. We need to get to the real penetralia of existence, that is, to the soul force behind, where we are happily one with universal forces, both light and dark. We can deal with the dark because we can liberate the light that's inside. But first we have to find what is centrally luminous in us. And in so doing, we can see. One becomes a seer. So we have to range through our whole being, scan all the worlds, support each other, plumb into the gross physical, into the inner and darkened planes, of the subconscient, the subliminal, the superconscient, and discover what we are in the round. Supporting all individual expressions. And what we discover is that we are the self, an aspect of that supreme, immutable being, conscious force, in knowledge and in power. The same self that holds up and supports every station of planar being. If there are planes, then every plane has the support of this supreme self, standing it up. This is the nature of that Purusha that we speak about, that supports Prakriti from behind. It's the same way, just a different language that we would use. And always, the many will be forever and ever the one. Only that really is. Everything else is an expression of it. It's like a silence from which the entire alphabet suddenly is spoken, and all letters converge and move and motivate and vary. And one winds up with an articulated language that speaks about the divine in its expression. But it comes back to that silence, that wise, complete being who holds all of this, even the noise and the chatter of the language, inside its own self. So, from material enclosure, consciousness grows towards an ultimate spiritual disclosure. From the material to the spiritual. From enclosure to disclosure. So our evolutionary effort must be comprehensive, and it must attain a power, must gain a power to depart from separative ignorance and ascend stage by stage into the integral knowledge, a knowledge where all is fused into something that is one, but does not dissolve. The forms of these steps of knowledge, all the stages of being, are real in knowledge and must continue. The integral knowledge is not simply the essential knowledge. It concords and comprehends all, and all are supported at once. So, I think if you could permit me, I'll read a quick passage from Sri Aurobindo towards the... Well, it is the end of his chapter, Exclusive Concentration and the Ignorance. This is chapter 13. The Absolute is not really limited by putting forth in itself a cosmos of relations. It is the natural play of its absolute being, consciousness, force, self-delight. The infinite is not limited by building up in itself an infinite series of interplaying finite phenomena. Rather, that is its natural self-expression. By the way, I'm on page 616. The one is not limited by its capacity for multiplicity, in which it enjoys variously its own being. Rather, that is part of the true description of an infinite, as opposed to a rigid, finite, and conceptual unity. So too, the ignorance, considered as a power of manifoldly self-absorbed and self-limiting concentration of the conscious being, is a natural capacity of variation in his self-conscious knowledge, one of the possible poises of relation of the Absolute in its manifestation, of the infinite in its series of finite workings, of the one in its self-employment by the many, of its self-enjoyment in the many. The power by self-absorption to become unaware of the world, which yet at the same time continues in the being, is one extreme of this capacity of consciousness. The power by absorption in the cosmic workings to become ignorant of the self, which all the time is carrying on these workings, is the reverse extreme. But neither really limits the integral self-aware existence of Sat Chit Ananda, which is superior to these apparent oppositions. Even in their opposition, they help to express and manifest the ineffable. The ineffable, analogous to the unknowable, something real, something beyond the real, but certainly beyond the mind. So, we chart a movement from the one to empowered multiple expression of the potency of delight. It's a cosmic hide and seek, as many have noted, that we might say where through the process of evolution, self-discovery, we disclose and discover hidden ranges and complexities of being, personal and then cosmic. And this process of evolution drives us from the darkest ignorance of our material moorings into associative contact with each other in a rising humanity that's aspiring for a felt oneness. The transcendent one manifests a multi-leveled and multi-formal and multi-personal cosmos. It is a real cosmos that is revealing over epochs what it means, what its significance is. Ignorance exists and may continue to exist in portions of the universe, even large portions of the universe. But it exists within a secret knowledge. Ignorance discloses, divulges knowledge as we grow and expand and become conscious. A meeting of the two spheres, the material and the spiritual, inevitably extinguishes in awakened individuals the deformity of division and ignorance. So if there is a victory to be won in conscious growth, it has to start in the individual, and that awakened, illumined individual must share and would share through association, mutuality, fraternity, the oneness that is just in front of us. So, I think we can return to Savitri about where we were last time, but even reread a line or two. And this would be in Book 1, the Book of Beginnings. In Canto 3, the Yoga of the Soul's Release, pertinent to this, and we're on page 25. A crown of the architecture of the worlds, a mystery of married earth and heaven, annexed divinity to the mortal scheme. A seer was born, a shining guest of time. For him, mind's limiting firmament seized above. In the griffin forefront of the night and day, a gap was rent in the all-concealing vault. The conscious ends of being went rolling back. The landmarks of the little person fell. The island ego joined its continent. Overpast was this world of rigid limiting forms. Life's barriers opened into the unknown. Abolished were conception's covenants, and striking off subjection's rigorous clause, annulled the soul's treaty with nature's nescience. All the gray inhibitions were torn off, and broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. Truth unpartitioned found immense sky room, an empyrean vision saw and knew. The bounded mind became a boundless light. The finite self mated with infinity. His march now soared into an eagle's flight. Out of apprenticeship to ignorance, wisdom upraised him to her master craft and made him an arch-mason of the soul, a builder of the immortal's secret house, an aspirant to supernal timelessness. Freedom and empire called to him from on high. Above mind's twilight and life's star-led night, there gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. Namaste, dear family. Such a pleasure to see you again. Be sweet, powerful, and bright. Move through the world felicitously. Be beautiful. Namaste.